Ross, let's get this kicked off. I'm here with Ross Connor, partner producer at Hotchkiss Insurance. How are you, man?
Good.
Good to see you. Good to finally get you on the couch. I feel like it's been a couple months in the making, and you and I connected through our good mutual buddy, Chris Hamilton, who you work with at Hotchkiss as well, right?
Yep.
So how did Chris finally put the birdie in your ear to start getting you to make some content, man?
Man, Chris has been one of those guys in my life that's just pushing me to places that I haven't been, not very comfortable going to, and we're kindred spirits. It's kind of one of those friends and associates, the friend first, actually, before we started working together, that you're just ping-ponging back and forth, right? But he's always a little bit ahead of me in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to marketing and sales and prospecting, and he just got good ideas. And so out of that came some good content he was, involved in, and creating some inbound calls and things, and I just and I started asking questions. And so your name quickly came to the surface through even another guy that we were working with at Hotchkiss too, and and your work speaks for itself.
Well, I appreciate that, man. But Chris is he's almost like my muse in self-funding. He's been on the podcast twice now. He's coming back for a third time. Quite frankly, Chris's episodes do really well too. Like, he's got his own audience, which is pretty cool. But like, he and I share visions on like health and fitness and self-funding and sales. And so he's a wealth of knowledge. So it's not surprising, honestly, that he was the one that was kind of encouraging you to try this. But I want to come back to the content in a little bit before we do anything else. I'd really like the audience to get a chance to know you, Ross. So could you share a little bit about your story, your background, your history? I think what I know about you, you shared some very interesting things with me, and I think the audience would find them interesting too. So the floor is yours, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. So everybody's got a story. I mean, where you find yourself is not where you ever thought you would find yourself. And mine's certainly indicative of that. And, I grew up in a very small family. And after college, was a business major and thinking I'm going to go into banking and things. And I started flying planes in college. And I'm like, man, I think I'm going to go to the military. I don't want to be in a bank, and I'm not going to move to New York. What do I want? And so I a week before officer candidate school, I don't think I told you this, in the Navy, I failed my last eye exam.
Really?
A week before OCS. And so I'm like, okay. And I was flying planes already, and I was like, well, it was too expensive to do on my own. So that sent me back on a long journey. Wound up being a Baptist missionary in the Caribbean for almost 2 years, and really just reassessing before I thought I was going to the Marine Corps, which would have really changed the trajectory of my life. And I wound up just having a complete change of heart, and I got involved in disaster relief construction work on a tiny island in the middle of the Caribbean.
Kidding.
And it really, and it kind of goes back, I needed some tangibility, and construction kind of provided that for me. Leaving a job site, seeing product built was really appealing and satisfying to me, and it's not what I found on spreadsheets and financial institutions.
Well, how did you get hooked up with the Caribbean gig?
I just wanted to travel. I mean, I'm the guy that took the gap year after college.
Okay.
Did great college, got out. It's like, what do you want to do? Well, now I'm going to go in the military. So I wanted to travel, and I literally was in a church in my hometown one day, and this couple from Argentina was up there, and I'm like, I want to do what they're doing. That's pretty cool. And so I wound up in the Caribbean, but super, super neat experience and transformative, because it really changed, settled me down, got to see the world a little bit, married my college sweetheart after that. And I started a 12-year career in construction. I mean, it had that much of an impact on me, and I just kind of punted.
So no construction experience prior to heading down there though, right? So were you just like the guy that were like, all right, Ross, you go over here and hammer these nails in? I mean, when you were starting, is that how you started?
Yeah, I didn't know what 2x4 wasn't really 2x4, right? You're told to go get the board stretcher, and you're like, where's the board stretcher? There's no board stretcher, right? We're just, and so I was that guy. But out in the Caribbean, I was procuring materials and getting these teams going, and yes, I was doing the work. And I'm like, man, I got a college degree from a great institution, and I'm not going to frame houses the rest of my life. That's not my calling, and I don't feel. But I got into home building. I mean, I was fortunate enough to get on with a national builder for 6 years and get up into management and in a regional market in Colorado, and I punted all that to start my own deal.
Okay.
In probably 04, 05, and that was kind of the
Well, when was the point where you think, oh, I can do this on my own, right? And I have enough experience that I'm going to go build houses, they're custom homes, right? Okay, so was there a first client that really engaged and said, Ross, I want you to do this for me? Or did you just go, hey, I'm going to go build some houses for people?
Man,
How'd that work?
No, it's a good question. It was a combination of things. It was a combination of feeling a little tapped out and kind of what I saw in even the banking world. I'm like, man, that's a really steep learning curve at first. But once I get to where, not to the top at all, but just, I can see the top from where I'm at. I see the top of the mountain. And guess what? That mountain doesn't go higher. It just continues on that ridge for as far as I can see. And there's some stability in working for large companies. But 2 to 3 years into it, I'm kind of going, man, I don't think that's where I'm going to be in 10 years. Yeah. And so do I want to wait 10 years? And no, I don't at that point. Trying to grow a family in that time as most people do in their 20s, 30s. And so that was probably the impetus, was just going, man, I'm going to learn a lot real quick. And then what? I'm just going to kind of exist for 20 years. And
well, so I had a similar trajectory of my career to you when you're just describing. It was like worked for a couple very big companies, very clear linear path to very nice quality of life all the way through retirement, but a very predictable, very kind of, I don't want to say mundane, but just a very repeatable daily life of that job. And once you kind of mastered the skill set of selling like stop loss insurance, for instance, what I did, there wasn't a ton of variability in that. And I needed, I'm the kind of guy, unfortunately, that every 2 or 3 years kind of gets a little bit bored. And so if I don't have a new growth opportunity within an organization or something new to kind of sink my teeth into, I get an itch a little bit. And so I feel like you had a similar epiphany about yourself as well.
Yeah.
So when you got that first home, I do want to hear about the first home, right? Because I'm sure learned a lot, probably some mistakes, some failures, but ultimately, obviously you succeeded and had a career there. So talk to me about that first one, man.
So I'm in my early 30s, probably go back, decided, am I going to go to Austin, Texas actually to do this, or my hometown in East Texas? I chose East Texas where I was born and raised. I'm like, man,
was that Tyler or where was it? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
If I'm going to start a business, I want to be where I was raised, and had a name there and a good experience in school. And so I went back there to do everything. And, this is 04, 05, right? And things are booming. Post 9/11, but things are back on the uptick. And I'm getting millions of dollars of loans in my name alone at that time, and was buying and lived off a 401k loan for a year, started a home. And I'm thinking, man, I could do 5 $200,000 homes, or I can do one $800,000 home. And
so went the
I picked the $800,000 home, and it was a spec. And, and I had the loan, I had the debt, I had the risk, sold it right before I put the carpet in. It was a home run, right? And I'm like, in 8 months, I've made more than I made, obviously in my old career. I'm like, doubled down, did another one, sold that one at carpet. And so things were really, it just kind of gives you this confidence to go out and like, man,
I'll do this 100 times a year and crush it. Yeah.
Stamp, repeat. Yeah. And so, I had some mentors at a distance back then, but it's probably one of the biggest downfalls.
Okay.
I'll fast forward in a second, but it really, I needed somebody to go, no, this is great. And I had people saying that, but at the time I'm young and aggressive and ambitious, going, you know what? No, these are assets. We'll sell them. No worries. So I wound up doing about 4 bigger ones. And at the time, as I hoped and planned, people start calling me going, hey man, I love this. Can you do something for me? Absolutely. So we really grew fast and hired staff, created a couple of entities. And then when 07, 08 hit, things really sunk, especially in regional markets, which hit with a vengeance, especially in a higher end product. People had money back then. They really did. Banks were about to close, but people had money by and large. Nobody wanted to get off the sidelines.
Okay.
And so the 4 large ones I was stuck with for 3 years completed.
3 years completed, just sitting vacant.
They were sitting,
Total, what, $4 or $5 million of assets sitting in?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit south of that.
So what happens in that instance? As these are just sitting vacant, obviously every month you're losing money, right?
You are, or you have such a nut to cover from an overhead standpoint and an interest standpoint that you really have, you're working so hard just to find a little to pay. I'm growing a family at the time through a little bit of unconventional means that grew really quickly. And so it was you look at how tenable is this? Like, it doesn't seem like and I started asking a bunch of questions in 07, 08, and I still wasn't through. But the bigger homes where people had money, those calls came in. It was just like, hey, I'm really going to work on my bathroom and my kitchen. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, I'll
Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
Even though we just built that $1 million home, I'll go help you here. And it was a disaster.
Okay. So then ultimately, what was the end for that?
The end is you dig yourself a hole that you just can't get out of. And I had some close, trusted friends in late 2009 go, man, my wife said over and over, this is killing you. It will kill you. And it was.
Okay. The stress of it all, the weight of it all?
The crushing debt, even the emotion sometimes. I work with a lot of home builders now in my role, but the good ones are able to manage that emotion from the buyers and so forth and make some better decisions, obviously, and provide some security and safety that I didn't have. But even that emotion from the customer is crushing. And so, but the combination of the two, I just had to make a change. And so I had some trusted friends say, just really encouraged me to go, hey, I don't think it's reinventing and reestablishing a new foothold on the same mountain. You got to find a different mountain.
So you just exited. So what happened to those 4 houses that were sitting vacant ultimately?
I had contracts all below principal that came in 1 month.
Okay.
In November of 2009.
So it allowed you to exit and minimize losses, I presume, or
have a really good regional bank who was also going through the ringer, but was much more established than I was, and a really, really great vice chairman of the bank met with me in a room, and I had the keys in one hand and I had the contracts in the other. And if he didn't take the contracts, he was going to have the keys.
Okay.
And he took the contracts below principal, and they did something with that negative equity, and they're a great bank.
Awesome, man. Well, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So it obviously kept it from being ultimately immensely catastrophic and having to file bankruptcy.
Oh, no, we went
Oh,
there.
you still did go. Okay,
Oh, yeah, no.
okay. Well, I'd like to hear about the recovery of that. I guess I did. Sorry, I didn't pick up on that. So went through the bankruptcy, right? So that's got to be obviously an emotional, journey to go through it with a burgeoning family and things like that. So that might move us into this next phase of the podcast and what the work you do today. But how did you pick yourself back up, man?
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com.
No, those things change you, right? I mean, those things impact you for the long run, and it's certainly I'll always be impacted for that. And I'll be honest, my wife and I talked back in the day. There's a lot of trials that come to you, right? And so a lot of those could be health related, family related, and ours happened to be a financial trial, and it was a big one. Kept my family, kept my wife, but there's dark days in that, man. And and it's interesting. I've told people back in even business school when I was getting out, there's always group projects. Hey, here's a business, grow it and invest the money in the market, and whoever makes the most is going to win, right? My fear in those days wasn't that I wasn't going to win, like, oh man, I'm going to get second, I'm not going to win. My fear was that I would lose it all. And so when you see that like self-fulfilling happening, in real time, it's like, oh man, that was my worst fear, and it's actually happening right now. I mean, that was just I look back on that, I'm like, that's probably what made it weird, right? And made it hard. Late November 2009, I was fortunate to have some great relationships in college with some people that ran an insurance agency who specialized insuring home builders, who insured me when I could afford it. And then I dropped it like a hot potato at one point in my career, my building career. And so I called them up and said, what do you really do? I really can't spell insurance, but I know I'm going to do something different. And I would have, no slam to what I do now, I would have shoveled horse manure for 8 years. If you said, you're going to pay your bills and feed your family, I'd get up and grab a shovel. I mean, and I think it took that, honestly, to start carving out a new path in sales and insurance. If there's a lot of things you can sell. Insurance is one of those things that just requires some fortitude and some creativity.
Some grit, and some creativity. But so just hearing you say, the self-fulfilling prophecy, it happened. Your worst fear was actually realized. Probably some of that too was though going, well, I might have already experienced the lowest point that could possibly happen, right? So like, I think that gave you an interesting perspective just hearing you tell that story of like, I'd go shovel crap, to make ends meet at this point. So I imagine it feels like a very sort of a little bit humbling experience, possibly as well. But then you go, okay, I've experienced the worst. I'm here. I'm still breathing. Still a roof over my head. I've got, food on the table to a degree, right? It's maybe a struggle, but the only place to go is up, right?
It is.
So I think that gives you the right perspective to start over. How old were you when you kind of started through, when you went through this?
34, 33.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then now here you are in the world of insurance. You don't understand, but your friends are probably making a pretty good living. You've got this opportunity. So what did you start doing?
So wound up securing a job with the current firm, Hotchkiss, where I am now, and just slinging policies, man.
Okay.
They were. I had some friendships within the organization, a couple of deep friendships going back even prior to college with one guy, and I chose the Dallas-Fort Worth marketplace, right, to just establish a beachhead and go to that office. We have 4 offices across the state, but it just made sense. They were in Houston, but training was incredible. They spent time and patience to get me up to speed, all that. And it that started in about January 2010 when it actually started. And things are rocking along. It's fine. I'm having some wins here and there, and I'm commuting still. The only home we weren't able to offload was a big model home we were living in that was way beyond our means at that point, but we were still living in a nice home in East Texas, and finally offloaded that about 2 years after I started.
Okay.
So I had been commuting for 2 years from East Texas to
What's that commute
Carrollton.
like? How far is that?
With traffic, about 2 hours.
2 hours each way and every day?
Mm-hmm. About 3 times a week.
3 times a week. Okay. And so, man, lots of windshield time, right? Make phone calls or be alone with your thoughts a little bit.
Yeah. So it created we laugh about it now. We're so far removed from it now that we can kind of look back and laugh. But my wife calls those the true luck years.
True luck. Okay.
Father was living in a nice community up in South Lake. I would stay with him about 2 or 3 nights a week. And so while I have this home that I really can't afford, kids that I'm struggling to feed literally at times, I'm up here in Dallas, right, going to True Looks with my dad, and I'm staying at his house in a really nice golf course community. And she's like, it's just the juxtaposition of these two worlds. But yet, I'd made this commute, drive around, meet with clients. I'm learning about business in a way I never learned about it. I'm meeting these great people through a lot of different connections, and they make money in a host of ways, which is super exciting to find out. And how do entrepreneurs work, and how do they take risk? And I protect that risk now. We can talk more about that, but there's some why there. There's some passion and going, like, I have been really unprotected at times in my life, and I was coming out of one. And I, without even knowing it, from shoveling manure to pay bills, whatever, to, I'm selling insurance for a living. When I got into the depths of it, I'm like, it created that. I realized what the why was. I didn't go into it because of the why. I wish I could say, oh yeah, I studied different careers and realized that wasn't it at all. It's just, but when I got into it, I'm like, oh, I have been exposed. I have lost. I've bet and I've lost. And so if I can help people from losing and betting the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, that's it. As a salesperson, right? You never want to kind of sell on fear, right? It's, it's kind of that unethical way to approach it, like scaring people into buying a policy from you. But with your situation, what I'm hearing, you actually lived it, right? So it's not necessarily a fear-based sale. It's like, no, this is actually what happened. And this is maybe what I learned through that process. This is what I would have done differently. And this is why I do what I do today. And here's how to protect yourself to prevent that. Or in the instance that it does happen, you've got a safety net, right? And I think that's a much different way to approach still coming out of a situation that has a lot of fear. And anybody that would have experienced that is going to come through that, and go, believe me, you don't want to experience what I experienced. But that's just, it gives you a position of authority almost of having gone through something like that, to go that I've lived it and I know what it's like, and I don't want that for you and your family.
Well, and if you touch the stove, we mentioned earlier about touching stoves, it's like, man, it's hot. Like, I remember it's hot, but I'm still okay, right? And I've learned a lesson from, and I look back, I had been in my new career probably 4 or 5 months, and got a call from the receptionist one day to come up, and I'm in cubicle end just slinging policies and dialing for dollars and doing all the things that you do. And there was a process server in the lobby of the office. I was so embarrassed. I was just, and he had 3 lawsuits from subcontractors and vendors I couldn't pay bills on, and I had been keeping everybody in the loop. I'd been calling people going, hey, I'm going to get you paid. I got to start over. Like, we have lost everything. And I had 3 people kind of call my bluff going, okay, well, you say you don't have anything. We're going to sue you to prove it. So I just kind of thought, okay, they're asking me to go back home, pay for attorneys I can't afford, just to prove in court that I don't have money. Like, none of that made sense to me.
Yeah.
And I sought some wise, godly, awesome counsel, whatever. And just, guys said, man, these are options, and bankruptcy is one of them, right? That's why that code exists. And it's not a business strategy, which some people use it, but it is there for a reason. And it took literally 5 minutes when the attorney to go, you don't have anything. I'm like, yeah, we don't have anything, I'm telling you. And he goes, oh, wow. And so we went through the process, man. And so I think, and here's the, to close that little chapter as I moved over into the new deal, I think the hardest part about life in general, especially for men, and there's something about this, especially if men assume the role of kind of primary breadwinner, and families are built of all different kinds, but food, clothing, and shelter, super basic needs, right? And so when I look at fear, like, where did the fear go back then? I had happiness back then. I mean, there was some family was building, didn't have anything, but man, we had these kids coming in, and we adopted through the foster system is the story there, and a big mix and variety and cultures of kids, and we wound up with 6 total kids, one of which is biological, but the rest were coming on in rapid succession as I was starting a new career. So we had this. I mean, it was just a cauldron of emotion and in weirdness, right?
Yeah.
And so my wife called me one day and goes, "Hey, we got a referral on two girls," and we were been thinking about maybe getting a foster girl, and we had this little method. I'd hang up the phone. I'd literally go in a little side room at my agency. She'd go in whatever. We'd pray for 5 minutes, come back together, and if we were both thumbs up, we'd do it. I mean, it was just quick thing. You don't sit there for 2 weeks and mull it over. They're literally going down a list of people, and those are my 2 daughters. They're now 15 and 14. Amazing. They came at 3 and 2, and so you're just making. That's how life was going back then. But I look back at food, clothing, and shelter. I'm like, man, if I can get past that, was I ever worried about food? No. Clothing? No. Shelter? I'm always going to have a place to live. I had a great family. So when that issue happened and I had to file, the only thing was my name's going to appear in the legal news in the back page where everybody goes, and they're going to see what happened. And it's all reputation. Yeah. And I think that was the last domino to fall. So is the confidence needed to enter a new venture, really, take chances. And I took a lot back then in terms of calling boldness and going places. I think it happened. Like once I conquered the reputational fear, which was the biggest one of all. Yeah. I got involved in the community back there. I was thinking of some civic stuff. It was just I closed that, and I'm like, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. Like I've conquered that. I'm going to eat. We're going to be dressed, and we're going to have a place to stay. And so, your point, it was up from there. It's like, okay, here we go.
Well, I love that, man, and I love that you were able to. I mean, a lot of people go through situations like that, and everything falls apart, right? Lose a family, perhaps, maybe substance abuse issues come up. And, I don't want to say I understand why, but I can understand why things like that would happen when it feels hopeless. It sounds like you're a man of faith too, so which I believe has probably precipitated some of the hopefulness of continuing to push forward, even if it looks like it's, desperate times. Sure. But now I would love to, Ross, I don't think we've even addressed this. You're in the property and casualty side. I feel like we should probably say that even for my audience. This is a new bastion of conversation for me, being mostly or predominantly in the employee benefits world. But I think Chris connected us because you've done some pretty interesting things in the captive world, especially around captives. That makes sense to me that I'd love to talk about. But knowing that most of the audience is a benefits listener, kind of explain to me really quickly what you would say is the main differences about property and casualty. And then can you dive into the world of captives within the P&C and how those might intersect with what we do, and maybe how they might slightly differ as well?
Yeah. Well, great question. So
Radion Health's Level Funded Plus offers brokers and consultants transparent and reliable level funded insurance for groups as small as 10 employees. With national PPO network access and 100% return of claims fund surplus, small groups can gain more control over healthcare spend without the need for IHQs or claims data. Discover a great alternative to fully insured plans at levelfundedplus.com.
When I came on with our agency, we were about at the time probably 90% property casualty, right? Okay. And there's some agencies, commercial insurance agencies, that are the exact opposite, right? In terms of benefits, percentage of revenue, and so forth. We have personal lines as well. But right now we're about 85-15. Chris is really starting to grow his percentage, right? So we're growing ours, so he's working even harder. So it's a neat, two sides of the house. But I credit Chris too, because while he and I were even associates, not even with the same firm at the time, there was a lot of conversation about what he was doing on larger accounts that was really creative. And I was fortunate enough to have some large accounts that grew to the point of the traditional insurance does not make sense. And so whereas benefits, captive business, self-funded business, it's a little more homogenous. The plans are very different. But when you look at cancer affects us all, right? And hip replacements affect us all, shoulders. So my world is a lot more bespoke to the client in the industry because their loss experience varies greatly. And benefits, does as well. Older workforces and, trucking companies are
right, but just to your point, insuring a restaurant's probably a lot different than insuring a construction company, 100%. Even of similar size and similar revenue levels. Yes. Like their liability, the concerns that they have are completely different animals, right? And that's what I don't really necessarily understand. So kind of tell me some of the specifics around that, insuring different types of companies, like what you're looking for, what you're insuring, things like that.
Yeah, so the risks that we insure, in traditional property casualty right now consists of property insurance, right? Weather-related perils and fire and theft and tornadoes. General liability, and it's really lawsuit protection for bodily injury, property damage, right? And you got work comp, employment practices, cyber, like that's all in our realm, right? Okay. Everything other than health and benefits. And so you look, okay, what are the risks? Which again has been super fun to kind of get my head around. And there are a lot of them are emerging. Cyber's been, it's a lot more homogenous now, I think. But man, that's a emerging risk that's bigger and more deadly and to business than we can even imagine. You can't fully insure it, right? So when I look at the different risks, I guess what I would say is this. When I decide what needs to be self-funded on a larger account, or when the company and I get together, you look at the risk and go, what's your biggest risk in the industry? So you can take benefits. Cancer affects us all. Well, guess what? Lawsuit potential for this industry is super, super high. That's a very bespoke risk to that industry or that client, perhaps. Work comp, same way. Like, what causes people to get injured, right? Well, they have some industries are all over the board. If I'm a staffing company for warehouse employees, that's a high risk injury. Right? Restaurant, we have cuts, we have slips and falls. I mean, and so I think when you look at those risks, I'm like, even property's all about geography right now. Like,
really? Okay.
Oh my gosh, where you and I live today is almost treated like coastal Houston for hurricanes because of hail
damage. Yeah, man, I noticed that in my premium going up this last year and going, well, what in the world happened? But to your point, 4 months into owning our house, we had to replace our roof. Yeah. A brand new home. Oh, yeah. Hail damage just tore up our roof, right? And you're going, well, welcome to Texas.
Well, so you look, we work with people with real estate portfolios too, and you look at the first thing to say is, where's everything located? Let's talk about it. How's it built and where's it located? And the thing I've loved the most about self-funded captive business, and we've been fortunate to have some great third-party partners, as Chris would attest to in his world. His are a lot easier to create is one of the biggest differences. Mine are a lot harder and have a longer time horizon because the loss history, the industry-specific loss history. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing one for a lumber company, guess what? Lumber mills and companies have been around forever. Some of our risks have not been, right? We've got some very creative, family entertainment type stuff, and and those are really nascent industries, right? That actuaries,
no history to
they love data.
Right? Yeah.
They don't have that much data.
Yeah.
And so it's longer to prove your case. Okay. And it takes patience, but yet at the end of that, the enjoyment comes from watching the rough, choppy seas and creating a harbor, so to speak. Yeah. And then you're like, man, they're thriving in that harbor. The grass is green, the trees are tall, the water's smooth, and it's like, meanwhile, everybody else getting beat to holy,
Well, so when you say captive, though, I'll say describe. I've covered captives a couple times here from the benefits world. That's just a grouping of employers into a cell or into a group and kind of sharing the risk across a couple different layers to normalize that risk, to stabilize that risk when they're self-funding, rather than being on their own and have a little bit less predictability in doing so. So how would that description of that model differ, or is it very similar when you're saying a captive in your world of risk management?
It's similar. So the similarity comes from kind of the group model, right? You've got group captives, which can be what we call heterogeneous or homogeneous, right? Same risk, same type of company. This is one for municipalities. Hey, we insure municipalities all over in the single captive. It's a group captive. Okay. The other one is, hey man, I'm a lumber company and I own a race car track and a circus. Okay, that's a heterogeneous, but yet everybody pulls together. There's a board, there's admission into the captive, there's management. Mm-hmm. It really becomes kind of a business unit to those companies, and they go to the board meetings. The other iteration of that is for larger organizations that spend quite a bit of money in premium, and it gets to the point where I call it the guaranteed cost market, right? Mm-hmm. Where you just pay the premium, you pay the claim, we're good. I budget. Yeah. That when those companies get to a level, it just becomes untenable because typically the insurance marketplace doesn't reward them, right, and makes a ton of money, or they may, in some cases, become uninsurable because of coastal property they have and nobody really wants it. Those are bigger companies, and it's a captive for one company, right? And then we call it 831B captive. And so those are a couple of different iterations. I'm sure benefits is the same way,
the
right?
831B, shout out to Phil Holoka. He covered that, he does a lot of that. I'll admit, way over my head, most of that stuff, especially the arrangement, kind of the tax component of that. But fascinating because it just lets you know that there's almost nearly infinite creativity. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you stay within the lines of compliance and regulatory rules, but insurance has, especially self-insurance, has nearly infinite amounts of creative control. Yeah. Whereas you called it guaranteed cost, fully insured, fixed cost model, whatever you want to call it. That model is buy it, pay it, forget it, but no control. either, right? No creativity. And I think we share that similarity across the aisle
For sure.
P&C and benefits. Now, I want to talk about, I know we want to kind of steer clear of exactly what industries, and I don't want to name names, but you've developed a little bit of a niche in your world. So talk to me about maybe how you sort of developed, you carved out a specialty perhaps of what you do very, very well, and businesses started to come to you around that. So can you share as much as you can, and obviously share publicly about what you do there?
Yeah. So, insurance agencies and producer books in and of themselves, they always take on a life of their own, right?
Okay.
And you can help self-direct that a little bit early on. I determined based on my past experience, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in a certain industry,
okay,
right? Or even a size of account type role. And so I wanted a mixed bag, and I've always enjoyed that. Again, back to how do people make money? What do they do? Answering the call, saying yes, we can help, kind of thing. And so I'm no different, right? My book early on took a turn into real estate development and construction. I came out of construction, so that was a natural place to cold prospect. Out of that came a lot of commercial construction and development, and I still have those clients today. They do great work. I love working with them. They're gotten complex, and I love that the more complex, the better. It's more of a mental game. But then I had we had a single location account really start blowing up through the franchise model, right? And they, have become an acquirer of other brands over the time. So it's like it's a different. It's created within our organization, and we've always been known as what we call a program insurance agency.
Yeah, can you describe the program? Chris used that terminology, and I don't think I fully understand when you say program what that means to you.
Yeah, well, and we get the question a lot. Like, hey, do you insure brick masons? How many brick masons do you insure? Well, we have some.
Yeah.
But our specialty is creating a program for brick masons as an industry, not in individual companies. And so, for instance, franchise business has become a specialty, a large specialty, and takes up a lot of my time. And is worthy of my investment because the franchise model, and I've seen so many creative companies start franchising that you would never expect. I was at a show recently, and there's a pipeline company out of California starting to franchise business. Pipeline, like laying heavy yellow iron machinery, digging ditches, laying pipeline. Oh, but it's a franchise. Those are usually very bespoke local companies.
Yeah.
They just said, hey, it's a great business model to expand our footprint. I'm like, okay.
All right.
So we've created, therefore, like if I have a single location franchise company going, hey, I've got to be compliant with a franchise agreement. Can you insure my business? This happened just about a month ago. Absolutely, we can help you. Our real value is in talking to the franchisor and really creating a program, because I can help you, but I can really help you from a pricing perspective if I help create a program for the entire organization. And that's what we specialize in. And so we'll go and we do a lot of what we call affinity-based marketing, where we'll go to associations, and we've done this for years, well before my time, with several state associations where we'll go and promulgate a program for all their members. And it's very bespoke to them. Can't join the program unless you join the association. So there's a lot of creative things we've done over the years. I took that a little bit and did it, so not so much association-based, but just large company franchisor-based.
Okay.
And so, good success story, that one turned into conversations with National. National goes, this is creative. We haven't heard that before, and this is awesome. Let's go for it. And so those programs get created through even simple little single locations.
Well, it's interesting hearing you. You obviously shared with me and off camera, like kind of one of those entities, but like you started at the ground floor and developed this special program, if you will, for one of these entities. Like you said, they blew up. And you sort of go along the ride with them, right? I mean, it's kind of cool to be able to start at the ground floor of something that gets really, really big. Of course, obviously, you guys benefit from that financially, but it's like you kind of rose with them. It's kind of like, somebody that ends up famous, but they married their spouse before they were famous, and they come along with them, right? But they knew them before they were famous, right? It sounds like you have a couple of those instances that happen to you, whether it's fortuitous or because of your skill or a combination of both. That's really cool to hear. And I'm sure that's probably going to be a client for life or, nearly life. One of the things that maybe you can explain to me that I've never understood as an only benefits guy, why is there an aisle between P&C and benefits? And why is it so difficult sometimes to speak the same language enough with one client to be able to cross-sell? I never fully understand that. Yeah, could you share with me maybe your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's as much as we want to make it the majority of engagements, get one agent involved in everything. It's not the majority, but when it works, it's beautiful. That's the whole design. And I think it's probably, I know very, very few people that do what I do that speak both languages with authenticity and a high level expertise.
Yeah.
I don't purport to. I lean on Chris all the time. Like, what they're doing is so creative. It's not for every company, but for the ones that it is for, it is a fantastic solution in a very worthwhile conversation, right? Yeah. I bring him in as often as I can. And honestly, maybe part of that is too, Spencer, you look where the pain is, right? And, and in my world, it's like, hey, where's the pain? We always ask our young producers, where's the pain? We have to find some pain. If not, there's nothing to really fix. Benefits programs create, or lack thereof, create a lot more pain right now than we do.
Okay.
The just frequency of claims. I mean, I use ours quite a bit. I have 6 kids, so we're always using the program. People don't really get low soft tissue lifting injuries every day, right? We don't have fires very often. We have them. Tornadoes are very rare. So people don't use my stuff. I sell a product that very rarely gets used. Work comp is probably takes the biggest hits. And so they don't have a lot of pain with what I do. And so sometimes I'm literally on Chris's coattails. Sometimes he's coming in with me the first meeting. Sometimes it's, oh.
Well, I'm thinking about the psychology from an employer's perspective, right? Like having 2 different agencies be your broker, depending on one doing one and one doing the P&C or vice versa. Very rarely is the agency considered the right fit for both sides. And that's something I haven't fully understood. And, maybe it's again, because I've only sat on one side of the aisle. But it seems natural if I'm an employer that I'd want to work with the same agency for both sides. So what percentage, if you could guess, would you say that Hotchkiss has both? 10% maybe?
Yeah, it's probably close to that. That's increasing, and I think it has to do with our capabilities as well, right?
Yeah, Chris is not unique to your agency either. I mean, there's a lot of agencies that do both and are heavier in one than the other, but don't have a lot of clients that cross over.
It's interesting too, and it has a lot to do with size of agency and capability. So there's very few agents. We're probably a top 100 firm in the country, more or less, which isn't really anything to hang our hat on because the top 15 to 20 in the United States are massive, publicly owned billion-dollar companies. And so the rest of us are literally kind of the table scrap guys, like going, okay, not really, but I mean, we make a great living doing that and not ensuring, the Exxons of the world, right? And so I think those in that tranche where we are that have this 50-50 split of expertise and it really from a revenue standpoint, I'm talking in benefits and P&C, those are extremely rare, right? And our scales since we've beefed up our benefits program and started servicing a lot more complex client in a much more creative way, making them a lot stickier to the agency, those percentages are bouncing out now. So we just took some active steps to do that. We weren't always there. And so there were some accounts, and that's Chris and I'm so fortunate to work with them because there was a time when they would clean our clock. If they came in on an account, and it's a benefits thing, they would clean our clock. And it might have been the reverse is true as well, and so we had some great war stories back in the day before we even got together. But
well, it sounds like you guys have a nice 1-2 punch, though, especially Chris. Chris is a rock star. Let's not make any bones about it. He's one of those guys that's absolutely so well thought of by his peers in the industry. But let's move out of the insurance talk because there is one thing that we haven't addressed, but we touched on very quickly at the front that you have recently discovered and put into motion, which is this idea of content, which is how we got connected. Obviously, you talked about Chris urging you a little bit in that regard, but I started seeing you very, very frequently coming out within the last few months on LinkedIn. You're making your own videos. I can clearly see you getting better and better with each one. You've added some humor into them. I remember one with a Viking helmet or something you were wearing or sword or whatever. But like you've leaned into it. And I think you've also told me that you've sort of felt some fruition come out of that as well. So talk to me about that, kind of taking that first step and making some videos. And then what has that experience been like for you from a business standpoint as well?
We're on a mission to partner with the most innovative companies in America to fix health benefits, one plan at a time. NavMD has created a blueprint that delivers world-class benefits to 155 million Americans. Better benefits starts with data intelligence. Our platform is empowering the next generation of advisors to zero in on opportunities to optimize the plan, build the right team, implement proven strategies and solutions. Join us on our journey to revolutionize health benefits. Let NavMD put you a step ahead.
Yeah, it's transformed a lot of my thinking, right? Andy's been a great part of this, right? And just in terms of pulling thought out.
Andy Neary.
Yeah. Pulling thought out and really setting it on the table and deciding, charting a direction and a course, right? Because there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of thoughts, and I absolutely need that help. I just do. And I fooled myself that I didn't for years, I think, until I just finally got wrapped around the axle going, where do I start, right? Like I mentioned, the franchise thing had really started to really kind of take off and become a specialty, no doubt about it. But how do I use technology? We had a technology discussion earlier. How do I use technology to bridge the gap between those that pay little, those that pay a lot, those that require an enormous amount of time, those that don't, and how do we make money in both of those? Technology has to come into play. So I started thinking about our marketing as well. Like, how do we use technology to create efficiency, just like I'm trying to do this in our actual book of business to make money? Because, I mean, people are expensive. They just are. And so from a marketing standpoint, I'm fully bought into inbound marketing. I think it's, in this point in my career, there is no other choice, if I'm honest with myself.
Okay.
Like the filtering of prospects, the list, and the introductions. I mean, those days, it's so limited right now because there's some, and we have a ton of good help, but it's just efficiency and time. And I do consider it kind of an art.
It absolutely is an art. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you put it out there, and it's out there in the public sphere, and it doesn't go away. And so if it's done well, and I feel like I'm scratching the surface, it's really also been defining for me to realize I love educating more than I'd love selling. I always have.
Yeah.
One leads to the other.
I was just say those two things to me are interchangeable. That's how I've always approached my sale, because what I sell often has been very consultative and sometimes complex. So if I'm not educating, I'm not going to be able to sell it simultaneously. But I think you're right too. It's like really what I see people when they make videos on LinkedIn, especially, which is really a small cohort of professionals all operating in a social capacity, but there's buyers and sellers on both sides of that video, willing to buy and ready to buy. They just need help being led to the buy.
Yeah.
What you're doing is educating them, but you're giving them free value. There's this notion, it was an outdated notion, but the notion is like, oh, work with me, hire me, then I'll show you all my capabilities. It's like, no, I'm gonna show you all my capabilities so that you do wanna hire me. And that's what great content, especially in our world, does. Is it demonstrates your capability, your expertise, your credibility to the world. Those people, like you said, inbound marketing, those people come to you and ultimately want to buy because they've already developed a relationship with your content over time.
And it could be base level too, Spencer. I mean, it could be as base level as, man, if I invite this guy out to New York to have a call with us, it sounds like they know what they're doing. Let's explore it more. I know what they're going to look like, sound like, and you're eliminating so many barriers to especially
rapport.
to insurance. I look at my own industry, and right, there's reputations, there's stigmas and all that, and it's been fun to kind of smash some of those, hopefully, over the years and make it, I always say fun, make the process more fun and enjoyable, because with the right client who thinks creatively, it is super fun and engaging, right? It can become a profit center of the company. Whoever talks about insurance becoming a profit center, you can absolutely do that. Control cost, right? But in the right company, make it a profit center. Those are things that I didn't predict when I made the jump.
Well, what I like about it too, and Chris does it a lot. A lot of people do it well. But like your personality comes through. And I think that's one of the key things. It's like, I am not just educating you about a particular subject. I've also see who Ross Connor is. I see maybe he's a little silly. Maybe he's got a good sense of humor. There's a joke or two in there. You add a layer of entertainment. But what is actually happening is you're demonstrating your likability publicly to people. And then they go, I want to hire that guy. He's smart and I kind of like him. Or he said this one thing that I also do this. I like cycling or I like cooking steaks or whatever it may be. You're letting them know a little bit about who you are in addition to what you do. So naturally the people that gravitate to you want to hire you simultaneously. To do that the other way, the outbound lead generation and smiling and dialing and getting meetings and developing a relationship might take you 18 months to do, right? And then that's one person that you've done all that effort to. If you put out a video that 1,000 people watch, 15 people connect with you, 2 people send you a message, and we get 1 appointment. Well, you just had a 1-minute video that serviced you well inbound, and it'll service you in perpetuity too, because people will find your content 6 months from now and come and do the same thing.
And you can't fake it either. I mean, and we know people that do, and maybe I've been guilty at times, but it's like at some level you can't fake either enjoying relationships or you don't. And at the end of the day, what do you do what you do, right? Relationships. Like, And yes, I get paid for some relationships. There's a lot of relationships you don't get paid for. But at the end of the day, meeting those new people, it just becomes a question of how do I meet more people that are like-minded? This has become a great way to do that, right? And so back to the education thing, I'm basically doing what I always enjoyed doing early on in my career, which was there were times when I would sit on a panel in front of a bunch of people, talk about risk management and insurance, and do it in a way that made sense to them, not use a bunch of fancy jargon, because that didn't resonate with me either. And I used to be on the other side of the table. So when I did that, we'd finish, people come up, oh, that was awesome, great, cards here, thanks. Oh, that was so cool. What about this? I got such a kick out of that. And I feel like I get to do that on a much broader platform now. And some of the biggest accounts and relationships that I manage and work on now came out of those educational moments early in my career. So I'm like, how can we replicate that a little bit more and that's all this is. It's just doing the same thing and telling people, and it's not, message isn't it for everybody. I realize that your message isn't for everybody.
No, it's not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
But for the target audience, spot on.
Well, that's why I look at places like Instagram or YouTube, right? You basically casting a video out into the ether and you're subjected to the algorithm. You don't really know who's going to watch, if anybody's going to watch.
Yeah.
With LinkedIn, again, narrower pool of people, but my audience are the people I connect with that follow me and we're connected with are people that want to know about that type of content, right?
Yeah.
They've connected for a reason, so they're kind of waiting for it, right? So yes, there's fewer people there, but I have a much higher level of engagement because that audience is engaged with that style of content. So it's kind of this idea of being kind of a big fish in a small pond, or Andy calls it being the mayor of your own town, right? You're the guy in your little town and people have found you over time because what you're putting out there has attracted the eyeballs and not earballs, but whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
The ears that want to listen to you. And I think that's a very strategic and very fruitful way to go about content, which you've done. And didn't you say you recently shared with me you had a success story that you drew a direct through line, a connection point from content to a win, right?
Absolutely.
It's amazing, right? And then that's proof in the pudding. Then you figure out, well, how do I do that more often, more frequently? How do I do it at scale? Video content allows you to do that without beating your head against the wall, making a bunch of phone calls all day long. You still do them, but
it's a long game.
It's a long game. It is a long game. And as long as you have an agency like Hotchkiss that sort of gives you the freedom to do that and has seen it happen, seen the benefit of it, like that's great, right?
And I think and they definitely have it, right? It's just, it's fun to work with friends. It's fun to work, but still have accountability, right? You always have to balance relationships and accountability. And honestly, the good relationships have that. If there's no accountability, then it's a little bit of a wheels off game. And I've always felt we've balanced that really well, but I do get a ton of freedom to do. And maybe it's because I've proved, hey, it works.
Yeah.
And so then,
when you prove it works, then they go, okay, I was a little skeptical, but hey, that's a nice account, right? You go, okay, see, I could do that again.
Well, and then and nothing teaches like road rash, right? So kind of back to the story of my story. And you've had it too. Nobody that's gone out and risked, right? It's like, have you risked failure? Yeah, we have, right? And have you failed? Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually want to do business with people like that, right? Because it's like there's road rash, and based on that, unless they're just an idiot or they're insane, they're not going to keep doing the same
There's
thing.
lessons learned, hopefully, from the road rash, for sure, man. Well, so why don't we do this? We'll zoom out and kind of close up the episode, Ross. So big picture, you talked about some emerging risk, and cyber, you mentioned, was one of those that maybe 10 or 15 years ago wasn't as concerning. What are you seeing on the horizon of things that employers are either thinking about and talking about or should be thinking about and talking about from the property and casualty lens?
Yeah, great question. So if I look in the role of it is so industry specific, right? I will tell you, I have been shocked at how simple and somewhat mom and pop-ish businesses are that have gotten cyber attacked.
Really?
Oh yeah, they get attacked, and it's fraudulent wire transfers, it's ransomware attacks, it's data collection, unauthorized data collection, denial of service. Like, they're small. The reason they're small, and there's a reason behind it, right? The bigger companies, Sony got hit, for God's sakes. Our government got hit through the SolarWinds thing. Like, there's a lot of things, and nobody's immune. They're literally waiting to get attacked, and you cannot prevent it. I recently had a cyber underwriter say, man, we'll get some data. That doesn't mean as much as just number of transactions, because we know nothing your firewall does is going to prevent it.
Really?
Yeah, but they want smaller companies because they're not asking for $250,000. They're asking for 12 to 15. And guess what? They're good criminals. If you pay the money, they'll give the data back. The ruse is over.
Oh, they're ethical criminals.
They're
good for
criminals.
them. Good to hear.
Honoring thieves, right?
Yeah.
So they and so it's a game, right? And those amounts they ask for are typically below an insurance deductible, which means you won't get your insurance company involved typically because they don't want Chubb on their tail. And so there's you can't talk about emerging risk without talking about cyber. It's been emerging, and it's just getting, with the Ukraine attack with Russia. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that emanates out of China and Eastern Europe, and everybody is aware of that. There's a lot that has come. We're always going to have fires and tornadoes, always going to have lawsuits and bodily injury. Like, I don't even talk about those. They're not emerging. They're the furthest thing from it. With the Me Too movement and some of the sexual allegations that were all over the news, that's created a higher level of sensitivity, especially with retail businesses and public-facing businesses.
Well, it's funny you say that. There was a gentleman that came on my podcast, started a company called WorkShield, and WorkShield's sole existence is to be a third-party platform that helps you with dispute resolution, sexual harassment, rather than having in-house counsel navigate. It's like, as soon as something gets triggered, it goes out to them, they investigate, and they have this deal where it's like within about average of like 4 days, it's done, right? They get it to resolution because of all that emerging risk around sexual harassment. They're like, hey, there's a business here and we can solve it faster and better and cheaper than if you had in-house counsels get together and do it. And it's just something I don't think about on a daily basis, right? If you're not one that is engaging in something like that would be considered risque, you're like, I don't think about sexual harassment, but it obviously happens, or even just a bad joke, or I mean, you name it, something gets taken out of context, and next thing you know, you have a potential lawsuit on your hands.
Yeah, in real time, Michael Irvin, right? This news this week. He's not covering the Super Bowl for one reason. He was out drinking. He came back, had a conversation, as all we know, at a Renaissance hotel owned by Marriott, and then an allegation was made as he apparently left the employee he was talking to in the lobby, and goes to the hotel up to his room by himself, ostensibly, right? That's what we know. Well, I found out today, driving in today, that he filed a lawsuit against Marriott and the employee for $100 million, right?
Whoa.
And so because he was taken off the broadcast, it damaged his reputation, everybody's talking about it. That's exactly what we're talking about. So we know one of two things. Something actually happened, and the female employee felt emboldened to say something, great for her. Or something didn't happen, right? But she felt emboldened to make a claim for nefarious reasons. But either way, she created, there's a much more receptive audience to entertain that. So much that Fox or whoever he works for takes him off the broadcast, right? And so I'm not saying anybody's right.
I don't know what happened there, but I can see also the blowback. And let's say the allegations were untrue and it was nefarious, and now there's this $100 million claim. Like, do you also have the pendulum swing back the other way, that now it scares people off from making legitimate claims, right? Like, it's a never-ending, constant battle.
It is, and depending on how much he gets. And one thing's for certain: Marriott's a massive company, right? Let's just say it's the Best Western down the street. Not that we're going to have Michael Irvin there at Super Bowl, but if that's a single location business, right? How much money is going to be spent to defend this for Marriott, right? They're going to self-fund this. Probably it's going to be 7 figures at least to get rid of this thing. There's going to be a judgment at some point. It's not going to be $100 million. I mean, that's how these things work in. And so a lot of my work is talking to clients about the frivolous nature of a claim, right? Or worse yet, the legitimate nature of a claim. In a very unfortunate situation, the employee's no longer with us. We have them all, but those risks, those soft risks, Spencer, have been a lot more prevalent lately. And there's a way to hedge the risk, right? But you can insure
anything. Like David Beckham insured his legs. I think J-Lo insured her butt or something like that. I heard, that you never know what you can insure. But one of the things, I'll plant a seed in your mind, perhaps, if it's some emerging risk. We were talking over coffee about ChatGPT, right? And there's infinite applications for using this. Basically, it's an interface. I don't think you'd heard of it, but it's an interface where you basically type in prompts or ask it questions, and it sources all the data up till 2021 that's available on the internet, and will respond. And basically, you can tell, hey, write me a script about a podcast on construction, and it spits it out. So I saw this guy say, hey, write me a lease agreement with a tenant. What happens if he puts that lease agreement into motion and there's a hole or something in that lease agreement? But he's like, well, I got it from ChatGPT. Now, who's liable for that? I mean, I'm just brainstorming, but I can imagine through the opportunities that are coming out of an artificial intelligence like that, there's also going to be some liability that comes from something that's generated through that mechanism. So that's just pie in the sky brainstorming in the future. But I think that's probably fun for you to think about, like, what to do in a situation like that. So why don't you land the plane for me, Ross? Closing thoughts. We've talked for probably about an hour or so. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for sharing your story, man. But what do you want to leave the audience with?
I would say I'm a product of life's challenges, right? Like everybody is, and I would say there's always hope, and there's a path forward. A lot of times, any new venture you create, whether you're an entrepreneur or you do go work for a big company, anytime you're hitting reset, I would say the why is a huge reason, right? And the mentality of I cannot fail, I think is probably key for any venture, whether you're coming out of a bad spot or just entering a new territory. And so the I cannot fail approach, I think is essential, and we see it every day. And even what we do, and we grow a lot, we grow very organically, rather than through acquisition as an agency. And so we're constantly training people on having to share stories and talk about the hard times. And in those relationships, especially internally at my company, that's what makes it worthwhile, because watching those people succeed, replicate a little bit of what's been done before them, super fun.
I love that, man. Well, I honestly, it's been great to get to know you, and glad Chris introduced us, and I'm glad you're embracing the world of content, and we'll get you some podcast clips and some content out of this as well. So hopefully it serves your business and gets you some attention. But either way, man, thanks for sharing your story, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Yeah, you as well.
All right, man.
Thank you.
Bye.